What if I told you the man you just ignored owns everything around you? When Ethan Carter, the CEO of a luxury fashion brand, walked into his own store Undercover, he wasn't expecting this. But what happens when he reveals who he really is? Let's just say, karma is waiting right around the corner. Stay till the end to see the moment that changes everything. The warm evening air buzzed with life as city lights flickered on one by one. It was rush hour in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, a time when the streets pulsed with the hurried footsteps of office workers, the hum of car engines, and the occasional melody of a street musician hoping to make a few extra dollars. The glass storefronts of high-end retailers reflected the last golden streaks of the sun, their sleek interiors promising luxury to those who could afford it. Inside one such store, Ethan Carter, a tall black man in his late 40s, stepped through the gleaming glass doors. He wore a simple navy hoodie, dark jeans, and a well-worn pair of sneakers. His neatly trimmed beard and deep brown eyes carried a quiet intensity, but there was nothing about his outward appearance that hinted at his true identity. The owner of Carter Luxe, the very store he had just entered. Carter Luxe was one of the fastest-growing high-end clothing brands in the United States, known for its sleek, modern designs and bold marketing campaigns. Ethan had built this company from the ground up, starting with a small boutique and growing it into a multimillion-dollar empire. But tonight, he wasn't here as the CEO. Tonight, he was just another customer. Ethan liked to do this every now and then, walk into one of his stores dressed like an average person, no suit, no entourage, no indication of his wealth or power. It was his way of staying connected, of seeing firsthand how his employees treated customers when they didn't know who was watching. As he stepped further into the store, the scent of polished wood and designer cologne filled his senses. The space was pristine. Glass shelves displayed neatly folded designer shirts, and mannequins wore the latest collection with effortless elegance. Soft jazz played in the background, creating an atmosphere of quiet sophistication. Ethan glanced around, taking in the customers, well-dressed professionals browsing racks of jackets, a young couple whispering excitedly over a new collection, and a sales associate chatting with a man in an expensive suit. He walked toward a display of limited edition jackets, running his fingers over the smooth fabric. "Excuse me," he said, turning to a nearby employee. The young man, a sales associate named Tyler Mitchell, barely spared him a glance. He was tall, blonde, and impeccably dressed, his name tag gleaming under the store's soft lighting. But instead of acknowledging Ethan's presence, Tyler's gaze flicked over him dismissively before returning to his conversation with another customer. Ethan frowned. Maybe the guy hadn't heard him. He tried again, this time a little louder. "Hey, could I get some help?" Tyler exhaled sharply, clearly annoyed. He turned around, finally looking at Ethan, and the slight curl of his lip made something tighten in Ethan's chest. "Yeah," Tyler said flatly, eyes scanning Ethan's hoodie and jeans. "We don't have anything in your price range." Ethan blinked. "I didn't say anything about prices. I just need help finding the right size." Tyler smirked. "Look, man, we don't really do a bargain hunting here. Maybe try one of those outlet stores down the street." The words were casual, but the meaning behind them hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He knew exactly what was happening. He had seen this before. For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. He simply stared at the employee, his mind racing with emotions. Disbelief, anger, disappointment. This was his store, his vision, his dream. And yet, standing here in the very empire he had built, he was being treated like he didn't belong. For a long moment, Ethan stood there, staring at Tyler, letting the weight of the words settle in his chest. "We don't have anything in your price range." He had built Carter Luxe from nothing, poured his heart into every detail, ensuring that his brand was not just about luxury, but about inclusion. And now, in his own store, he was being dismissed, judged, and outright denied service, simply because of how he looked. A slow, quiet rage simmered beneath his calm exterior. He had expected to see flaws in customer service, maybe a lack of enthusiasm from employees, but this was a blatant rejection, not of his ability to pay, but of his presence. Ethan took a measured breath, forcing himself to stay composed. Losing his temper here wouldn't fix anything. If anything, it would only confirm whatever assumptions Tyler had already made about him. "Excuse me," Ethan said, his voice controlled but firm. "Did you just assume I can't afford anything here?" Tyler let out a short chuckle, shaking his head. "Listen, man, I've been working here for 2 years. I know who actually buys from this store. And no offense, but—" His eyes flicked down to Ethan's sneakers, the slightly faded hoodie. "You don't exactly scream, luxury customer." Ethan clenched his jaw. It wasn't just what Tyler was saying, it was how he was saying it. The smugness, the condescension, the way he seemed so sure of his assumptions. Before Ethan could respond, another voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan turned to see a young woman approaching. Her name tag read Sophia Reynolds, assistant manager. She looked between him and Tyler, sensing the tension in the air. Tyler let out a dramatic sigh and gestured toward Ethan. "This guy was asking for help, but I was just explaining that we don't really carry. I just needed help finding the right size," Ethan interjected, keeping his gaze steady. "That's all." Sophia frowned and looked at Tyler. "Then why didn't you help him?" Tyler shrugged. "I was getting to it." Ethan could see the moment Sophia realized what was happening. Her expression shifted, subtle, but telling. There was a flicker of something like embarrassment in her eyes, like she knew exactly what had gone wrong, but wasn't sure how to fix it. "Sir, I apologize," she said, turning to Ethan with a professional smile. "I'll be happy to assist you personally." But Ethan wasn't ready to let it go that easily. "That won't be necessary," he said, voice calm but laced with meaning. He glanced back at Tyler, who stood there, arms crossed, looking more irritated than remorseful. "I was just wondering, is this how you treat all customers? Or just the ones who look like me?" Silence. Sophia's face paled slightly. Tyler scoffed, shifting on his feet, but didn't answer. Ethan felt something stir deep within him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every customer who had walked through these doors expecting respect and had instead been met with judgment. He had come here tonight looking for insight, and now he had found it, though not in the way he had hoped. This wasn't just an issue with one employee. This was systemic. And as he stood there, in the heart of his own creation, Ethan made a silent vow. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ethan took a slow, steady breath. He had spent his entire career fighting against the idea that luxury belonged to a select few, that wealth and status were determined by appearance, background, or connections. Carter Lux was supposed to be different. And yet, here he was, standing in the middle of his own store, treated like an outsider. He wasn't going to let this slide. Without another word, Ethan turned on his heel and walked toward the store's main counter. His steps were deliberate, measured, the air around him tense with unspoken energy. Tyler and Sophia exchanged glances, their confusion evident, but neither dared stop him. Behind the sleek marble counter stood Michael Brooks, the store's general manager, a man in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a tailored suit that screamed experience. He looked up from his computer screen, adjusting his glasses as Ethan approached. "Good evening, sir," Michael said smoothly. "How can I assist you?" Ethan studied him for a moment. Michael had been with Carter Lux for years. He had personally hired him, in fact. But the real test was about to begin. "I'd like to speak to the owner of this store," Ethan said, his voice cool and composed. Michael hesitated. "The owner?" "Yes," Ethan said, folding his arms. "I have some concerns about how customers are being treated here." Michael's expression flickered, just for a second. Then he forced a polite smile. "I'm afraid Mr. Carter isn't available at the moment." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "So that's how it is. And if I wanted to leave a message for him?" Ethan asked. Michael nodded, reaching for a notepad. "I'd be happy to pass it along." Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose. He had given Michael an out, a chance to recognize him, to make this right before it got worse. But instead, the man had doubled down. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough for Michael to hear. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Michael blinked, momentarily thrown off. Should I? Ethan chuckled, but there was no humor in it. It's funny, really. I built this store. I hired you. And yet, here we are. The blood drained from Michael's face. His eyes widened, darting to Ethan's as realization set in. Mr. Carter? He breathed. At that moment, the entire store seemed to hold its breath. Tyler, who had been watching from a distance, suddenly stiffened. Sophia's lips parted in shock. Ethan straightened, letting the silence stretch, letting them feel the weight of their mistake. Now that we've established who I am, he said, his voice carrying through the store, I'd like to have a real conversation about what just happened here. Michael swallowed hard. Sir, I had no idea. That's the problem, Ethan interrupted. His gaze flicked toward Tyler. Neither did he. And that tells me everything I need to know about how customers who don't look like your usual clientele are treated here. Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it, suddenly finding the floor fascinating. Michael, to his credit, quickly shifted into damage control mode. Mr. Carter, I assure you this is not how we run things here. If you'd allow me to. Ethan held up a hand. Stop. Michael froze. I'm not interested in excuses, Ethan said. I'm interested in solutions. Because if this is happening in one of my stores, it's happening in others, and I will not allow that. The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over them like a heavy fog. Sophia, who had been watching intently, suddenly stepped forward. Mr. Carter, may I say something? Ethan turned to her, nodding once. She hesitated, glancing at Tyler before looking back at Ethan. I saw what happened, and while I didn't stop it immediately, I knew it was wrong. She swallowed. But the truth is, Tyler's behavior isn't new. He's done this before to others, and no one's ever done anything about it. Ethan studied her. Why didn't you report him? Sophia's shoulders sagged slightly. Because I didn't think it would change anything. Her voice softened. I see the kind of customers we prioritize. The ones who get greeted the moment they walk in. The ones who get extra attention. And I see the ones who get ignored. It's not just Tyler. It's the culture here. Ethan's chest tightened. He had fought for years to make Carter Luxe a brand that stood for something. To make it his not just in name but in principle. But if his employees saw discrimination and expected it, if they believed it was just how things were, then he had failed. Not in business, but in leadership. Ethan nodded slowly. Thank you, Sophia, he said. That was brave. Tyler scoffed, shaking his head. Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong. Michael spun toward him. Tyler, stop talking. But Ethan wasn't done. He turned back to Michael. I want a full report on every customer service complaint we've received in the past year. I want to know if there have been other instances of profiling. And I want it tonight. Michael nodded rapidly. Of course, sir. Right away. Ethan's eyes flicked back to Tyler. And as for you, Tyler stiffened, face flushed. Ethan let the words hang for a moment, then exhaled. We'll talk. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind an entire store that had just realized their real boss had been watching all along. The weight of the moment lingered long after Ethan walked away from the counter. The quiet murmur of conversations that had once filled the store was gone, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Customers shifted awkwardly, sensing the tension but unsure whether to stay or leave. Employees stole nervous glances at one another, waiting for the next move. Ethan didn't waste any time. He walked past the mannequins, past the sleek glass shelves, and straight into the staff-only area at the back of the store. The break room was dimly lit, its walls adorned with motivational posters about teamwork and customer service. Words that now felt ironic. Michael, Sophia, and Tyler followed a few steps behind, their footsteps heavy with anticipation. Ethan turned to face them, arms crossed. Close the store. Michael flinched. Sir, you heard me, Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for debate. Lock the doors. Put up a temporarily closed sign. We're having a conversation. Michael hesitated for only a second before nodding. He turned and relayed the order to another employee, who quickly moved to follow instructions. Now it was just the four of them: Ethan, Michael, Sophia, and Tyler. Ethan exhaled slowly before speaking. I built Carter Lux with a vision. A vision that every person who walks into one of my stores is treated with respect, whether they come in wearing a three-piece suit or a hoodie and jeans. He looked at Tyler. Tonight, that vision was completely disregarded. And I want to know why. Tyler, arms folded, shifted uncomfortably. Look, Mr. Carter, I didn't mean any offense. Ethan arched an eyebrow. Offense. His voice remained calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. You assumed I couldn't afford to shop here. You dismissed me without even attempting to help. And when I pressed the issue, you suggested I find an outlet store. So tell me, Tyler, what exactly was your intention? Tyler hesitated, his gaze flicking to Michael for support, but there was none to be found. It's just, I've worked here long enough to know the kind of customers who actually buy things. Tyler mumbled, the defensive edge creeping into his voice. I wasn't trying to be rude. I was just being realistic. Ethan let out a slow breath, forcing himself to remain steady. And what does realistic mean to you, Tyler? Because from where I stood, it looked an awful lot like profiling. Tyler scoffed. Oh, come on. It's not about race. Sophia cut in sharply. Isn't it? Tyler turned to her, surprised. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. You don't do this to white customers, Tyler. I've watched you. You greet them with a smile, ask if they need assistance, even when they walk in wearing casual clothes. But tonight, you took one look at him and made a judgment. And if he wasn't the owner, if this was just a regular person, you would have sent them right back out that door without a second thought. Tyler's face darkened, his jaw tightening. That's not fair. Neither was what you did, Ethan said. Silence stretched between them. Michael cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, I assure you, we take this very seriously. Tyler will be reprimanded. And Ethan cut him off. Reprimanded. His voice was steel. This isn't just about one employee, Michael. This is a culture problem. And if Tyler's behavior went unchecked for this long, then that means leadership has failed, too. Michael swallowed hard. Sir, Ethan held up a hand. I'm not finished. He turned back to Tyler. You have two choices. Tyler stiffened. One, Ethan continued, his voice controlled but full of authority. You resign. Right now. You walk away from this company, and I never hear your name again. Tyler's face paled. And if I don't? Then, Ethan said, you stay, but under one condition. He stepped closer, locking eyes with him. You start at the bottom. Stockroom. Inventory. No customer interaction. And for the next 6 months, you undergo intensive customer service training. You will personally sit in on diversity and inclusion courses. And if you prove that you've changed not just with words but with actions, then, and only then, will you be allowed back on the sales floor. Tyler looked stunned. You can't be serious. Oh, I am, Ethan said. Because this is your chance to prove that you're more than just your prejudices. Tyler swallowed hard, his face red with frustration. He glanced at Michael, then at Sophia, as if searching for an escape. But none came. Ethan waited. A long silence stretched between them before Tyler finally let out a bitter breath. Fine, he muttered. I'll take the training. Ethan nodded. Good. Then he turned to Michael. As for you. Michael straightened, clearly uneasy. You're the general manager, which means you're responsible for maintaining the culture in the store. And tonight you failed. Michael looked down, guilt written all over his face. I understand, sir. Ethan studied him. He knew Michael wasn't a bad person, but he had become complacent, and that was just as dangerous. I'm giving you 3 months, Ethan said. In that time, I expect to see a complete overhaul of our customer service policies. I want every employee retrained. I want mystery shoppers evaluating interactions. And I want results. Michael nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Ethan turned to Sophia. You were the only one who spoke up. That takes courage. Sophia looked surprised. I just did what I thought was right. Ethan gave her a small, approving nod. And that's exactly the kind of leadership I want to see more of. He looked at Michael. Effective immediately. She's being promoted to senior sales lead. Sophia gasped. What? Michael blinked. Sir, you said she's been here for years? Ethan asked. That she knows the store, understands the clientele? Yes, but then consider this her reward for standing up when no one else would. Ethan's voice softened as he looked at her. Congratulations, Sophia. You've earned it. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded firmly. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I won't let you down. Ethan exhaled, running a hand over his beard. The night had taken a turn he hadn't expected, but deep down, he knew this was necessary. This wasn't just about one interaction. This was about setting a new standard. And starting tonight, Carter Lux would be better for it. The tension in the store slowly began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet murmur as the remaining employees processed what had just happened. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind still racing. Tonight had been an eye-opener, not just for the staff but for him as well. He had built Carter Lux with the belief that it would be different, that it would stand for something more than just high-end fashion. But reality had proven otherwise, and now he had no choice but to fix it, starting with this store tonight. As soon as the doors reopened, there was a shift in energy. The employees, now hyper-aware of their actions, moved with more care, their interactions more intentional. Sophia, despite still being in shock over her promotion, took charge immediately. She approached customers with warmth, ensuring they felt valued, while discreetly keeping an eye on the rest of the staff. Michael, humbled by Ethan's reprimand, was already taking notes on how to implement the changes Ethan demanded. He approached Ethan cautiously. Sir, he said, clearing his throat. I just wanted to say, I understand now. I should have been paying closer attention. And I will do better. Ethan studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Good, because I expect real change, Michael. Not just apologies. Michael nodded firmly. Understood. Tyler, on the other hand, was a different story. He was noticeably subdued, his usual arrogance replaced by quiet frustration. He hadn't argued with his reassignment to the stockroom, but his rigid posture made it clear he wasn't happy about it. As he disappeared into the back, Sophia watched him go before turning to Ethan. Do you really think he'll change? She asked hesitantly. Ethan exhaled. That's up to him. I gave him a choice. Whether he takes it seriously or not, that's on him. Sophia nodded thoughtfully, before saying, either way, this store needed a wake-up call. Ethan smiled faintly. That's exactly what they got. That night, as the store closed for good, Ethan sat in his office, staring at a blank document on his laptop. He had a lot of work to do, new policies to draft, training programs to implement, and most importantly, a message to send across the company. His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa, his wife. Lisa. Hey, how did everything go? He hesitated before responding. Ethan, eye-opening. Some things need to change. A moment later, another reply came in. Lisa, then change them. Ethan smiled. That was why he married her. She always believed in him, even when he doubted himself. He set his phone down and started typing. The memo that would go out to every Carter Lux employee. The policies that would ensure no customer ever felt ignored, dismissed, or judged again. And the steps that would transform Carter Lux, not just into a successful company, but into a better one. One where everyone belonged. 3 months later, Carter Lux was nearly unrecognizable. Not in its appearance, but in its culture. Ethan's strict new policies had taken full effect, and every employee underwent extensive customer service and diversity training. Secret shoppers were regularly evaluating the stores, ensuring that every guest was treated with dignity and respect. Michael had stepped up. Humbled by his experience, he worked tirelessly to rebuild trust within the store, ensuring that employees held themselves accountable. He personally led training sessions, setting a new example of leadership, one that wasn't just about managing but about listening. Sophia thrived in her new role. Her natural ability to connect with customers made her one of the store's most respected figures. Employees sought her guidance, and customers often returned just to be assisted by her. And Tyler? He had struggled in the beginning. The transition from the sales floor to the stockroom had bruised his ego, and for the first few weeks he was bitter. But as time passed, something changed. Working in the back of the store, organizing inventory, gave him a new perspective. He saw how much effort went into the business beyond the sales counter. And during his customer service training, he heard stories from people who had been judged, dismissed, or ignored, just like Ethan had been that night. One afternoon, Tyler approached Ethan hesitantly. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I just wanted to say, I was wrong. About you. About how I treated people. I get it now." Ethan studied him for a long moment before replying. "Good. Now make sure you never forget it." A week later, Tyler was allowed back onto the sales floor. This time, he greeted every customer with a genuine smile, regardless of what they were wearing. Sitting in his office late one evening, Ethan glanced at an old picture on his desk. Himself, years ago, standing in front of the first Carter Luxe store. He had built this company to create something different, something that stood for quality, but more importantly, inclusion. That night, when Tyler had refused to help him, he realized how easily even the best intentions could be lost if left unchecked. This experience had been humbling. It had forced him to confront the uncomfortable truth that bias, even unintentional, could infiltrate any space. And if he, the CEO, could be treated as less than in his own store, how many others had faced the same treatment? That thought fueled him. From that moment forward, Carter Luxe wouldn't just be known for its high-end clothing. It would be known for its values. A company that welcomed everyone. A company that listened. A company that learned from its mistakes. The story of Carter Luxe wasn't just about a business, it was about humanity. Ethan's journey was a reminder that respect isn't just for the people we expect to see. It's for everyone. And the truth is, we all have choices. We can choose to judge or choose to understand. We can choose to ignore or choose to speak up. We can choose complacency or choose change. Tonight, Carter Luxe had chosen change. What will you choose?